Kept you waiting, huh? What? Hey! Look, everybody! We're back! Everybody's favorite mid-tier YouTube gaming channel. Just like the good old days. Proudly underachieving since 2009. You're watching the Brotherhood of Gaming. I'm your host, William Morris.
And I'm your co-host, Eugene Morris. And as we all know in life, a lot of things change. But some things remain the same.
Man, Gene, it's hard to believe that you and I started this channel literally like, what, 15 years ago?
I know. We're still playing video games, and we're old enough to qualify for AARP.
But, despite that, there are some things that do never grow old or out of style. One of those things being the one and only legendary franchise of all, Castlevania.
Now, we've covered the Castlevania series a lot over the years, but surprisingly, there are a few Castlevania games we have yet to give the full review treatment. So, now is as good a time as any to do so.
I couldn't agree more, Gene. And you know what? What better way to celebrate this franchise than to play the one that started it all way back on the NES, the original Castlevania. Now, we're sure everybody knows by now, but we'll cover some of the history anyway because it seems appropriate. The original Castlevania game was released in 1986 and was directed by Hitoshi Akamatsu, with the main producer and designer being Akihiko Nagata. They set out to create a game that captured cinematic elements of a classic horror movie made way back in the day. And it is beyond clear that the movies from the old Hammer films were the main source of inspiration. These include movies such as The Horror of Dracula and The Curse of Frankenstein.
This is the doctor who dares to challenge the vampire Dracula, the bedeviled master of all that is evil.
What are you trying to tell me, Paul? The Dicta's wicked? Insane?
Wicked, insane, evil. Call Frankenstein what you will.
You take control of Simon, a member of the Belmont clan, a family tasked with fighting off the forces of evil, led by the Prince of Darkness himself, Count Dracula. Simon must travel through the countryside, fending off classic monsters such as bats, mummies, medusas, hunchbacks, and a whole zoo of undead weirdos, all while trying to progress to the main threat himself. Now, your primary weapon is the legendary Vampire Killer Whip, the ultimate nope button for all things evil. Now, while it is your primary weapon, and it is adequate enough, one thing that you will notice is that by pressing the action button, it has two phases. First, there's the wind-up motion, followed by the attack itself, which in short means there's a small delay in Simon's attack animation. When you start the game off, you have its default setting, which is basically a limp noodle.
But the game also makes it clear right away from the start that the whip can be upgraded to expand and become stronger. The first candle you whip will be your first upgrade, which gives it the chain look. It's fine, but the second upgrade you get doubles its length, which is the real game changer. Honestly, the game at every turn does go out of its way to give you these upgrades as soon as you get started, from either the beginning or right after you die. So I think even the game developers knew that getting this final upgrade to the whip is key to help you get through your adventure. But then again, I guess it does beg the question why they designed the whip this way at all, since they really do just go out of their way to give it to you at every turn. Why not just have it from the start, you know? Darn it, I know that there's a joke in there somewhere about length and that being what matters in the scheme of things, but you know, after all these years, I feel like I'm just too mature for a joke like that. And I wish I wasn't.
Yeah, we're older and more sophisticated now.
It's a dick joke!
But while whipping is important, there are other weapons for you to get that you will need to make things easier. These are the trademark sub-weapons. Now there's 5 in total in this game, and each one of them make a significant difference in your adventure. There's the throwing daggers, which are self-explanatory. Holy water, which while not having great range and not looking all that intimidating, is absurdly powerful, especially for attacking at angles. The Holy Cross, which is essentially a boomerang. Throwing axes, which are most effective against flying enemies. And Time Stop, which freezes opponents for a small period of time. However, Simon, being the one-trick pony, and a man who thinks pockets are a luxury, not a necessity, is only capable of holding one sub-weapon at a time. So when you whip a candle and touch a new sub-weapon, that one is your new one, and the one you had is gone. So keep that in mind as you venture forward, because oh my god, nothing could be more frustrating and soul-crushing than intentionally holding onto a weapon you know that is useful, only for it to suddenly be switched for one that is, well, less useful in your current situation.
And there really is no undoing this. So while you can just tread forward and whip at every candle you see, you really gotta pay attention and be careful what falls out of them. The same can be said for occasional enemies too, that could potentially drop a sub-weapon for you as well.
Now, the fuel for these weapons are hearts of all things, and like the sub-weapons, you get them by whipping candles or defeating enemies. You will need these hearts to be able to use your sub-weapons too, so they are a must. Now, you may be asking yourself, well, if hearts are fuel for my weapons, then how can I replenish my health? Why, simple! By whipping random walls to reveal pot roast. Well, you didn't know?
Yeah, stupid. What, you didn't know? It's not like we haven't had 25 years worth of gamers already explaining this and making it abundantly clear. I mean, still, it is just kind of weird how it's 2025 and we're just now talking about this. Shoot, man. Gamers out there watching us must think we just discovered fire or something.
I know, right? Jesus. That subscriber count started to make sense. Hasn't gone up in 12 years.
All right. So yes, meat, pork chops, and all the other proteins are indeed located hidden in the walls. They are absolutely helpful in a tight spot, and if you know where they are, all the better. However, unless you have that knowledge going in, which not many of us do, odds are you'll be swinging at every wall that you come across in vain, hoping that you will find some health to keep you alive. And let me tell you guys, it's the hope that hurts the worst. Oh! Speaking of food, Gene, guess what?
What's that, Bill?
It is time for the video sponsor! Rob, where's the sponsor?
What? Sponsor? Who are you guys kidding? Raid Shadow Legends didn't even want you.
Oh. Well. Okay then.
So, shall we talk about the game more?
You know what, Gene? That is the kind of forward thinking I like.
Let's talk about Simon's movements. He has the manliest walk ever, the classic Belmont strut. This is how fast he walks in the game, so get used to it. Besides that, he can duck and jump. He can jump and attack at the same time. Simon's got it all, folks. So Simon can walk, attack, jump, duck, and he can tank quite a few shots. At least early in the game. So you might be thinking, this game's pretty easy, right? Yeah, this is a game that's designed to kick your ass. First off, as strong as Simon is, his movement is very stiff, and he cannot influence his jump in midair like other video game protagonists.
Yeah, I know, right? Simon really needs to hang out with Mega Man more. So when Simon jumps, he is committed to it, for better and for worse. Often for worse. Because here is the thing. Despite the length of his health bar, it's not very often that you will die by having your bar whittled down to 0. Unless you're fighting a boss. Nope. Most of the time, you will be suffering from good old-fashioned insta-deaths. Because you see, when Simon gets hit, while in standing or in a jumping position, he will be knocked backwards. And since this is a platformer, Simon will likely 9 times out of 10 be backflipping right down into a bottomless pit. With that said, while this game can get very frustrating, it is not at all impossible to beat. While the game, like many back then, relies a great deal on trial and error, which is you first have to die and then remember what you did wrong so that the next time you go there and you recognize the enemy patterns and figure out which sub-weapon to use, getting through the levels in this game is quite possible, and keep in mind, the game does have unlimited continues, which just start you off back at the beginning of whatever stage you were in, so, in truth, the game's only over when you kill the power.
A great weapon to use is the stop clock. When activated, it freezes your enemies in place, allowing you to take them out. Now, they do require a large amount of hearts, but it makes certain areas far easier to get through. Also note, the stopwatch can also work on bosses, except when it doesn't.
I gotta admit, in my playthroughs, the stopwatch was the last thing I ever wanted to get, because it just never worked. I never really found any situations where it was favorable for me to waste that many hearts using it. But I guess that's what makes this game great in the replay value department. No playthrough or strategy has to be the same.
Other useful items that can appear in select locations or select circumstances when whipping include these number blocks, which will allow you to send out a sub-weapon twice or 3 times in a row. There is also a Holy Cross, which acts as a screen nuke, and helps you gain extra points. Remember, this is an old Nintendo game, so points do matter. And if you get enough, you can get extra life.
I've never been one for points in the long run, because when I was a kid, honestly, beating the game was more than enough of an accomplishment. And nobody I knew ever cared about the point system. That being said, there are some hidden treasures Simon can collect if you know how to trigger them. You only have a few seconds before they're gone, but catching them does net you some pretty big bonus points, which can get you an extra life faster. But again, since this game doesn't really have a traditional game over screen, extra lives, for the most part, are kinda pointless. Sure, when you die while having lives, you get to respawn at a checkpoint, but that can also work against you if you have a sub-weapon that you were relying on that you could only acquire earlier in a stage. And because of this, something I learned years ago, and I should stress, the candles and their drops are not randomized. If you know where the specific item drops are, they will be there every time. And you could, and frankly should, plan accordingly.
Now, as you travel through the stages, you will eventually come across boss fights at the end of each one, which includes a giant bat, Frankenstein's monster, a giant Medusa head, mummies, and the Grim Reaper himself. Huh. Well, that was easy. In my experience, probably the most dangerous enemy is not bats, not skeletons, not armed knights or hunchbacks. No, your most dangerous enemy may be the stairs. Seriously, when you're making your way up these things, you're pretty much a sitting duck, what makes it particularly difficult when you're dealing with knights and they're throwing axes, and skeletons who throw their bones.
I feel like it's a double-edged sword, you know? You are absolutely a sitting duck while you are on the stairs and tanking hits, but it is also a way that could be a lifesaver. Because, yes, while you can't jump off of them, that means you can't get knocked backwards off of them either. And when surrounded by pitfalls, sometimes tanking a hit is better than the alternative. Still, the best thing to do is to not let yourself get put into that position in the first place.
And that comes from trial and error and experience. Eventually, you come to learn which weapons work best for any situation. Again, the whip alone is decent enough to get you through obstacles, but my favorite weapon in this game is the holy water. It shreds through everything, and the flame lingers so that anything touches it gets damaged and stunned. And as you saw with death earlier, it's devastating just about every boss encounter.
The biggest challenge in my eyes, once you realize this, will be to not lose the holy water. Because as we've stated, the sub-weapons spawn in very specific places, and sometimes you only have one chance to get it. In the Grim Reaper stage, for example, it's located near the start of the stage, meaning if you want to use it on death and stand a chance, you have to go through the entire stage and not lose it, either by accidentally picking up something else or by dying in the process.
Everyone knows about the room right before the Grim Reaper boss fight. That long hallway gauntlet with the knights and the Medusa heads. It's a death trap. And if you're familiar with the Angry Video Game Nerd, he himself made it very clear about how crazy this section is.
The hardest part in the entire game, besides Dracula, is the hall right before the Grim Reaper. You have Medusa heads coming at you from both directions, and 2 knights throwing axes at 2 different altitudes. I mean, look at the pattern going on here. Anything that hits you drains a quarter of your health, so that means 4 hits and you're dead.
And once again, just to drive that point home, there's the holy water that's absolutely turning this room into a cakewalk.
If getting the knife is the #1 tip in Ghosts and Goblins, then getting the holy water should be the equivalent for Castlevania. And you know what? I am still very proud of myself for figuring this out on my own when I was younger. I didn't have a guide or any YouTube video. No, I actually remember being so dismissive of the holy water because of how lame it looked due to its poor range that one day I just really wanted to understand just what the hell the developers were thinking putting a garbage weapon like this in a game, and so I forced myself to use it and see if it had any worth whatsoever. And it turns out it's the deadliest thing in the game. Proof positive that looks can be deceiving.
Okay, so several levels beaten, and you've managed to make it to the final stage. Now it is time to face off with Dracula himself. However, quick tip. You see these candles in the room to the right before you go to the throne room? If you whip them all, then you go down the stairs and come back up, you can see that they have been restored. This will allow you to whip them again. This is a great way to load up on ammunition and weapons like the boomerang cross. Highly recommended, by the way, because if you manage to cheese your way through every other boss encountered before now, sad to say, Dracula has no such strategy. Now for his first form, his only weak spot is his head. I like to use the boomerang as my main attack. Jump and throw at his head. It's really useful if you get the 2 block, which will allow you to do double attack. Remember to keep moving in this fight, as Dracula not only shoots triple fireballs at you, but he also teleports in random spots in the room, which means that he could possibly land right on top of you and do damage. And at this point in the game, Simon can only tank 3 hits before he's dead.
Yeah, you are not whistling Dixie about that teleport, pal. Him spawning right on top of you can be pretty freaking bullshit, because you have just a few milliseconds to move out of the way. And if he turns around while you're attempting this, he can still hit you! Gah! This is why I always hated that just enemy hitboxes are enough to damage you. This fight is hard. Really hard. Gene's strategy of using the boomerang is not a bad one, because it does work and can end the fight quicker. However, for me, I like to take the slower approach and take my time with my jumps, trying to get over his fireballs and get those good hits in with the whip. And the reason I choose to do this is because I don't want the boomerang destroying that last candle that is on the left side of the room. Do you want to take a guess at what's in it? Now, after you send Dracula's head sky high,
ugly motherfucker.
Again, for me, same strategy. Focus on the head with your boomerangs and whip. The problem is his big frame. When he jumps at you, he can box you in and do damage, along with his fireballs. But with enough movement and practice, you will eventually topple his ass.
Personally, I would say the first form is harder, merely for the teleporting, and you really want to try to get to his second form with as little damage as possible. You know, just in case you have to tank a hit or two. But as for me, now that we have the holy water, you could come pretty close to stun locking Dracula, getting quite a lot of hits in with both the water and the whip. Same problem though. While he jumps around, he can box you in, but he does do a bigger jump too on occasion, and that's when it's best to quickly strut to the other side and get more of that room back. Once you've got that, it's pretty much a done deal for Dracula.
And with the Dark Prince down for the count, we see his castle crumble and the light sweeps away the darkness. At least for now.
Great game.
Yeah, Still holds up pretty well.
True.
Oh, which reminds me, what do you think of the music?
Of course, when we talk about Castlevania, we have to discuss the incredible music. The series has a legendary soundtrack. The person that gave the series its musical voice was Kinuyo Yamashita, and the first Castlevania game was her debut work. She, along with Sato Terashima, together put the soundtrack in place. And while they were restricted by the hardware of the time, the fast beats provided, such as the Vampire Killer, became the baseline for the series, and it launched Yamashita into the mainstream. Of course, later games would expand on the series' masterful musical hits, but the first game did not disappoint.
As for the visuals of the first 8-bit game, how do they hold up? Well, pretty darn good. While the color scheme does not match the gothic atmosphere that it was trying to go for, the colors that they do end up using make the game absolutely stand out. The developers got as much detail from this game as possible, in both the foregrounds and the backgrounds. It would have been easy enough to make the game look watered down with a less detailed palette of colors, but in the end, working with the bright colors that complement each other and make things stand out just makes the adventure all the more inviting and begging for exploration.
Guys, as much as I love talking about Nintendo, can you wrap it up already?
Fine. Jeez.
Ugh, he's so impatient.
Yeah, I don't know where he gets it.
Too much TikTok.
There are certain video games that were destined for greatness, to influence other franchises in the future, and Castlevania was one of those games. Its stiff controls and difficulty will deter some from trying it, but for those who appreciate a good retro challenge, this game is an essential part of any gamer's library and gaming history as a whole. To think, many franchises we know and love today would not exist if not for this game right here.
To this day, Castlevania has inspired many other imitators and love letters, and that speaks volumes. And over the decades, the series has gone far, which, with spin-offs, alternate universes, and 2 animated shows on Netflix, Castlevania truly is one of the greats. And while I'm sure most of you watching have already played it, or played another of its series, we encourage all players, new and old, to once again tread into the 8-bit halls of Dracula's castle.
And remember, folks, in this world of gaming, legends like this don't die. They just respawn. So grab your whip, stock up on holy water, and keep the adventure alive. Who knows? You might just discover a hidden wall roast or 2 along the way.
And you know what? I feel like we're going to stick around this franchise just a little bit longer because I still feel like I'm in a Castlevania mood. It's October. I don't get to play this series all that much. So you know what? We're going to go back to the Sega Genesis this time, and we're going to play Castlevania Bloodlines, because I feel like this one really needs to be talked about.
Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.